I think the question I have is twofold, but it's about the same group of voters. It's about what I would call the Kasich Republicans. I think we have two questions about them. Number one, are they going to vote today? So it's a turnout question. And number two, are they going to vote Republican?
Well, that's been the big fear of Republicans here, is that they cannot get those people to connect Republican agenda with Troy Balderson, and even bringing in Donald Trump over the weekend, which does a lot for the base here, which gets some of those base Republican voters out, doesn't do enough to speak to those Kasich Republicans, those Mitt Romney Republicans. Chuck, I've been walking around, I've been talking to folks at election sites and in some of these suburbs, and what I've heard a lot of, and what I think is interesting about this, even Democrats and Republicans are both talking to me about change. They don't like how things are going in Washington. Sometimes they don't like it because of the president's behavior. They don't like the way he talks or tweets, but they're just sort of fed up with Washington. And of those people, Danny O'Connor is absolutely the change candidate. We're standing in a district where parts of the counties had leaned towards Obama in the past. They voted for Trump in overwhelming numbers. If they want change, Danny O'Connor is the guy. And the second thing that I've noticed is that Balderson, the Republican here, seems to be sort of stumbling across the finish line.
Right.
You don't get a sense that he's able to carry what happened on Saturday with President Trump being here into Tuesday. He's had some awkward campaign events. He kind of bad-mouthed one of the counties here that's going to turn out a lot of the vote. It just seems like all the bounces are going Danny O'Connor's way here.
Right.
He still has a math problem, though, but the feel on the ground is that the bounces are going his direction.
I got to ask you about the Trump rally, and I'm going to ask the panel about this later, too. But did he want it or not? Did the campaign ask for it or not? You got John Kasich going out there going essentially apoplectic, it sounded like what the heck are you bringing Trump into the district for?
Yeah, Balderson has gone out of his way to not address that question directly. I tried to ask him a version of that the other day. He basically said, look, I'm honored to have the president here. It was great to have the president here. I'm always happy to welcome the president here, but wouldn't address particularly the Kasich part of that question directly. Remember, getting Kasich's endorsement was a big deal for him in this particular race. This is Kasich's base of support right here.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.